Hungarian Folk Tales. Sebastian, the Dragon Slayer. Once upon a time, there was a poor man. And the poor man had 3 sons. They were so poor that they could not afford to buy even the smallest morsel of food. So they decided to go and see the king and tell him of their misfortune. As they were ambling and rambling along their way, they saw an old shepherd grazing sheep on the hill. The eldest son said, "Ah, if these sheep were mine, I would give one to every poor man." The old shepherd replied, "Then from this moment on, you shall be the shepherd here, and the sheep shall be yours." The 2 other youths continued on their journey, and the old man went with them too. They reached a field of hawthorn. The second son said, "If only there were vines in this field and not hawthorn, and if only the vines were mine, I would give a vine of plump grapes to every poor man." "Then let the field be yours," said the old shepherd. "And instead of a field of hawthorn, let it be a vineyard." And the second son stayed to tend the vines. The third son continued on his journey with the old shepherd by his side, and soon they arrived at the banks of a broad river. The young man said, "If only I were the ferryman here, I would take everyone to the far banks and ask not even for a penny." So the old shepherd agreed and continued on his way home alone. He ambled and rambled along, and soon his path took him winding back to where the first youth stood. "You have so many fine sheep, my son," said the old man. "Would you give me one?" "If I gave one of my sheep to everyone who happened by, in the end I would not have a single sheep to my name." The old man gave a wave of his hand, and suddenly the hill turned to stone. Then he continued on his way to meet the second son. "What a lovely vineyard you have, dear boy. You could give me a vine or 2. "I will not give you a vine, not even a cluster of withered grapes." And before he could so much as cast a glance at his vines, the entire vineyard turned into a field of prickly hawthorn. The moon was high in the sky by the time the old shepherd reached the river, where he found the youngest son. He called out to the other side of the river, Come across the waters on the ferry." The wife of the ferryman was heavy with child, so the old man had to wait a while, but the youngest brother soon crossed the waters on the ferry. He did not ask as much as a single penny from the old man. Meanwhile, the baby was born, and they asked the old shepherd to be the godfather. By the time the baby had grown to be a boy of 7 years old, he already seemed to be a lad of 20. The old man said to him, "Now, Sebastian," for this was his name, "I will give you a sword. If you tell this sword, 'Sword, sword, sharp and true, mighty sword, slice his head in two,' and it will slice the head from the neck of any foe." The boy thanked the old man. "And now," said the old man, "go to see the king of the nearby lands, for they need as many shepherds there as there are days in the year. But do not ask a high wage, no more than 12 gold coins, a saddle and a horse. Play on the pipes and drive the flock into the rosemary forest, and fear nothing." So he went to see the king of the nearby lands. "Your Majesty, do you have need of a shepherd in your kingdom?" "Indeed I do," said the king, and he took the boy into his service. "Take the flocks out to graze and play the pipes as you watch over them, but do not go over the bridge, for if you do, you will surely meet your death." Sebastian took the flocks out to graze, playing on the pipes. The king watched him from the window. The boy was deep in a rosemary forest. He took off his cloak and spread it out at his feet. Then he took out his pipes and played on them. There was a stream nearby, and as the water rushed and gushed, suddenly a 7-headed dragon emerged from the water. "And pray tell, what stray winds have brought you here? Do you seek the unhappy fate of the other shepherds who came here before you?" Sebastian took his sword in hand and asked the dragon calmly, "Why, what fate befell them?" "Why, if you are so bold to ask, "I will show you," roared the dragon, and he charged at the boy. Sebastian lifted the sword above his head and cried out, "Sword, sword, sharp and true, mighty sword slice his head in two," and each of the 7 heads of the dragon fell with a thud to the ground. The next day, when Sebastian was eating his breakfast, a 9-headed dragon emerged from the waters of the stream, but it fared no better than the 7-headed dragon before it. The king could not fathom what had happened, for until this Sebastian had come along, he had lost a shepherd every day of the year. "I will pay it little mind," thought the king. "We will wait and see what the fates have in store." Again Sebastian took the flocks out to graze, and he stopped to have a drink from the stream when suddenly a 12-headed dragon emerged from the waters. "How dare you come to this place?" Sebastian drew his sword. "Sword, sword, sharp and true, mighty sword slice his head in two." When the dragon had but a single head remaining on its shoulders, he begged for mercy. "Oh, Sebastian, Sebastian the dragon slayer, please leave me with this one head, and I swear I will serve you." So Sebastian let the dragon keep the last of its 12 heads. Under the bridge there was an enormous cave, and the dragon took Sebastian to its mouth. Sebastian had never seen anything like it before. It was an empire bigger than the realm of the king. There Sebastian found the sheep and the shepherds that had been stolen by the dragons. "Come with me to see the king," said Sebastian, and with that he sliced the dragon's last head off. When he returned to the castle, the king soon realized he was a man of great courage and strength. He gave Sebastian his daughter's hand in marriage, and with it, half of his realm. "I accept your daughter's hand in marriage," said Sebastian, "but your lands you may keep, for I am a lord of a kingdom even finer than yours." They celebrated their wedding that very day, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. A talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 3 beautiful daughters. He was leaving for market one day when he asked his daughters, "Tell me, what would you like me to bring you from the market?" The eldest replied, "Dear father, bring me a golden dress." The second daughter replied, "Bring me a silver dress." "And what shall I bring for you?" the king asked his youngest daughter. "Dear father, bring me a talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach." The king shook his head. "If such things are to be found in this world, I will bring them to you, daughter dear." The king went to the market, where he quickly found and purchased a golden dress for his eldest daughter, a silver dress for his middle daughter, but he simply could not find a talking vine, a smiling apple, or a jingling, tingling peach. The king was downcast. It saddened him that he was unable to fulfill his most beloved daughter's wish. While he was brooding, his coach gave a sudden jolt and got stuck so deep in the mud that the horses could not pull it free. The king was furious because his trusty horses could race more quickly than the stars across the night sky. He sent to the village for help, and when news spread that the king's coach was stuck in the mud, men, women, and even small children came to lend a hand. To their shame, no one could push the king's coach free. All of a sudden, a pig appeared. "Oink, grunt, oink, your highness, give me your youngest daughter's hand, and I will free you, your horses, your coach, and everything." The king stood and stared in amazement, but whatever the king thought, He simply replied, "We will shake on it, a king's hand and a pig's trotter. If you free me, I will give you my youngest daughter's hand." The pig didn't wait, didn't hesitate. He wedged his snout under the wheels, gave a shove and pushed the coach from the mud. The horses took off at a gallop and the king was back in his castle in a flash. And when he got home, he gave his eldest daughter the golden dress and his middle daughter the silver dress. But with great sadness, he said to his youngest daughter, "My dear girl, my darling daughter, why didn't you ask for a dress too? For I failed to find a vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach." But hardly had he finished when he heard a gruff grunting outside. He looked out of the window and saw that the pig had even brought his wheelbarrow. "Oink, Grant, oink! I've come for your daughter. Let her come down and I'll carry her off in my wheelbarrow." "Stop there," thought the king. "I'll send you a maiden." A peasant girl was quickly found, robed in the beautiful golden dress, and sent out to meet the pig. But the pig was no fool. He said to the king, "Oink, Grant, oink! This is not your daughter." The king began to regret that he had ever given his word to a filthy swine. And the princess? She sobbed and moaned so terribly that the whole palace shook. The king, shedding bitter tears of grief, told her, "My dear daughter, I have promised you to the pig, so you must go." Then the king had an idea. He dressed his youngest daughter in dirty rags and sent her out to meet the pig. The pig, when he saw the princess, was beside himself with joy. He grabbed the girl, placed her in the wheelbarrow and carried her off, grunting and oinking all the way. "Oink, Grunt, oink! Don't cry, princess. You'll be happy with me. We'll soon be home." But the daughter only really began to sob when the pig came to a stop in front of a large sty, took her inside and sat her down on dirty straw. "Oink, Grunt, oink! This is my home," said the pig, and he offered her some corn. "Oink, Grunt, oink! Have a bite to eat, princess." But the princess simply sobbed and moaned. She cried and cried until she eventually fell into a deep, deep slumber. The princess slept and slept, and she didn't wake until noon the next day. As the noon bell rang, she opened her eyes and, wonder of wonders, she was dazzled by a blinding light. She had lain down in a pigsty, and now, lo and behold, she awoke in a palace. A host of maids hurried to her bedside. They brought her sumptuous robes and dressed her beautifully. Then they took her into the neighbouring room, where a handsome youth sat at a table laden with food. He said to her, "Take a seat. Everything you see is yours. I too am yours, if you will have me." "Who are you? What are you?" the girl asked. "I will tell you in good time. Come now to the garden." He took her arm, and they went into the garden. In the garden, a fine vine leaned towards the maid, and the clusters of grapes spoke, "Pick us from the vine, princess." They walked on, and soon she espied an apple tree, the little red apples on its boughs smiling beautifully. "And as you see, we have smiling apples too," said the youth. They walked a little more. "What is jingling and tingling so sweetly?" the princess asked. "Jingling, tingling peaches, as you wished. Now will you stay and be my wife?" The princess wrapped the youth in her arms. "Yes, I will stay and be your loving wife for the rest of my life." But the youth then told her how he had once been a king, but a cruel witch had changed him into a lowly swine and put a curse on him. He would remain a pig until he found a maid who had wished for a talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach. They sent word out that very day, inviting every member of his kingdom to the wedding. Their fabulous feast was indeed a wondrous sight to see, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Butcher Boy George. Once upon a time, in a land far, far beyond the hills, there lived a youth named Butcher Boy George. You could travel the length and breadth of the land, visit 7 villages, and never find his match. So strong was the boy that he needed no meat cleaver. He could kill a bull with his bare hands. One day, Butcher Boy George decided to bid farewell. So he said goodbye to his father and his mother, and he set out to see the world. He rambled and ambled across the lands, and on the 7th day of his journey, he arrived at the edge of a huge, dark forest. He looked to the left, he looked to the right, to see if perhaps he could espy the glow of a campfire, and indeed, he suddenly saw the shimmer of flames flickering between the trees. He set out towards the fire, but then thought better of it, for he feared that perhaps the fire had been lit by bandits. But hardly had he taken a step, and again the glow of the flames flickered in front of him. Again he turned to the left, he turned to the right, but no matter which way he turned, the shimmer of the campfire always followed his gaze. "Oh," said Butcher Boy George, "come what may, I will not turn away any more like a sheep trying to flee the wolves." And he went straight in the direction of the fire. When he reached the fire, he saw an old woman poking at its coals, trying to kindle their glow. He greeted her. "Good evening, good woman." "Good evening to you, my boy. What brings you to this distant forest?" "I'm searching for lodging, good woman. If only I could find a place to rest my head." "I could give you a place to rest your head, but I must warn you that every night demons come to my house at the first stroke of midnight, and they bring grief to anyone they find." "I do not fear, good woman. I only want a warm bed for the night. The rest is my concern." The old woman mumbled something to herself, blinked with her falcon-like eyes, led the boy to his room, made his bed, and left him there. The boy went to bed, and he soon fell asleep. But he did not sleep long, for at the first stroke of midnight, the demons began knocking at the doors and windows, making such a clatter that the whole house began to shake. Even Butcher Boy John felt frightened by this. Leaping from his bed, he took his stick in his hand and waited to see what would happen. Suddenly the door gave a mighty creak, a tremendous chest flew into the room, a long walking stick popped out of the chest, wearing a red cap on its end, and lunged at Butcher Boy George. But Butcher Boy George knew a thing or two about demons. He knocked the red hat from the end of the walking stick, the hat rolled under the bed, and as all the demon's strength was held in this hat, the walking stick too quickly took refuge under the bed. So Butcher Boy George leapt out the door, turned to make the sign of the cross on it so that the demon would be trapped, and withdrew to hide out on the porch. Meanwhile, day was beginning to break outside. Cockerels had begun to crow, and the demons returned to their realm. As soon as the demons had departed, Butcher Boy George went into the old woman's kitchen. You cannot imagine the spectacle that awaited him there. The fire was blazing high, and its flames licked at the bottom of a soot-black cauldron of boiling tar. In front of the fireplace, a beautiful young maiden sat stirring the tar and sobbing to herself. "Why are you crying, gentle maiden?" "Oh, my poor soul," the maiden replied. "Alas, I have good reason to sob. I stir this boiling tar for my own weak body." "And who told you to do this?" asked Butcher Boy George. "The old woman who took you in. She hired me as a cleaning girl, but she did not need a cleaning girl. In truth, she seeks to make a witch of me. But since I refuse to become a witch, she will burn my body to ashes and dust in this boiling tar." "Fie!" cried Butcher Boy George. "I will put a stop to this. Do not fear, gentle maiden. Just keep stirring the tar and blowing the coals that they glow red hot beneath the cauldron, for the tar will be the witch's bathwater, not yours." Then suddenly the old witch arrived, and she asked the girl, "Has the tar come to the boil?" "It has, old woman, it has." "And you? Do you want to be a witch?" "I do not," answered the maiden. "I ask you for a second time. Do you want to be a witch?" "I do not." "I ask you for a third and last time. Do you want to be a witch?" "And I answer for the third time. I do not." "Oh, you wretched maiden, into the cauldron with you!" But Butcher Boy George had heard quite enough. He leapt out from behind the door, took the witch in his hands, spun her in the air, and tossed her into the cauldron of boiling tar. In the blink of an eye, her body sizzled to ash. "And now, gentle maiden, the world is ours," said Butcher Boy George. "Come with me, and we shall be man and wife forevermore." The girl wasted no more time, for the brave butcher boy had won her heart. But before they departed, they went to the cellar, where there was enough gold and silver for every village in the land. They gathered as much silver and gold as they could and left the rest, that others might have some too. And together they lived happily ever after.